In a world of complex and overwhelming challenges, the Inspirational Insights podcast provides a shift in perspective. Dive into the minds of brilliant thinkers, creatives, and edge-riding leaders who have adapted their thinking and leadership practices to match today's perplexing challenges. Your host, Donna Jones, leads captivating conversations with trailblazers from diverse fields who have transcended tough and complex conditions to contribute to a healthier world. Can we collectively break old habits to reinvent the human work-earth relationship and support the vitality and diversity of all life? Harnessing agility, embracing possibilities. Welcome to the journey.
Welcome to the Inspirational Insights podcast. Today, I'm really delighted to have Curtis Michelson because Curtis and I go back to network analysis days, ONA, the ONA amigos. Curtis is probably one of the more creative, innovative, energy-charged thinkers that I happen to know. So together, we're hoping to bring to you today a bit of an overview of 2025. And actually, I'm just turning to Curtis for all of that. But by way of setup, we did this last year.
Yeah.
And by way of setup, what we're looking at is not only what you can see ahead, the more predictable types of things, but also the emergent things which have signals attached. Some people see those as the same. I see them as nuanced. They're different. Not different as in different ballparks, but different processes are underneath the surface. And so emergent would be more like there's some cues, there's some signals, and when you put them together, you start seeing something show up, very characteristic of complex systems. Mm-hmm. And now Curtis, who is, as I say, one of the most innovative thinkers I know, and definitely someone you want on your team if you're going to hope to be part of the future and at least shaping it, particularly in a very out of the box kind of way. Curtis is the person to talk to. So Curtis, can I just toss the ball over to you?
Sure, hold on. Let's formally do it. Throw it to me. I'm going to catch it. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Now.
Yes. So, hello everyone out there in TV land. I'm Curtis Michelson. I should have put my last name, but I was just rushing to get onto this call. I been one of those mornings, right? And probably like many of us have. It's one of those mornings we have some back-to-back calls, and so let me take a deep breath, have a sip of coffee, and settle into this comfy couch of Donna's and this conversation. And it's an uncomfortable conversation because we're in some rough times. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. When we talked last year, Donna, I mean, I was looking more at some tech and some agility and innovation trends. But I mean, and I'm not talking about just the U.S. elections. I'm just talking about all over the world, democracy systems that we thought were going to hold strong are, if not breaking, they're showing some cracks, you know. And we're seeing that in many, many countries. We're seeing economic cycles that are just volatile. We're seeing, of course, AI and technology, which is a sector I track. So one of the things I do and try to stay up on as best as anybody can is the various manifestations, implementations of AI, now called generative AI, the hot new kid on the block, which we talked about last time. It was coming on, and 23 was a big year. 24 was a big year for it. Of course, 25 is even bigger. There will be a bust. I'll talk about that in a minute. There's a bubble going to burst. There's a bubble going to burst. The levee's going to break, as Led Zeppelin would say. In fact, funny, just a sidebar. Someone sent me an AI produced. If Led Zeppelin, do you like Led Zeppelin, Donna?
I love Led Zeppelin.
All right.
I truly do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if someone created, if someone was to record that album, the classic album that they call, I think, Led Zeppelin 4, which has the Levee Break song, has Misty Mountain Hop and Stairway to Heaven. It's got so many classic songs on it. If it was to be recorded in the 1940s, what would it sound like? So someone did that.
Yeah.
And you know, do you want to take a wild guess how someone was able to do that with just the click of a mouse and a button?
No.
Well, It's the magic of generative artificial intelligence.
Ta-da! My gosh, that's amazing. I mean, I've been fooling around with it from a digital art point of view because some of my ideas, I have a picture in my head, but I can't, reproduce it.
Right.
And so I've been fooling around with it with that. It's been epically disappointing, but with the
Yeah.
odd exception. I mean, I asked it to create an infinite improbabilities machine visual, and I got a decent version of that.
Okay.
But anything I draw comes out completely warped. Very sad.
Yeah. Well, this was. There's an expression that Ethan Mollick uses. Ethan Mollick, the author of the book Co-Intelligence. I'm not sure if you've looked at it. I would recommend it.
Okay.
He was the one who early on, as a kind of university professor, he had what he called his 3 sleepless nights. I think he talks about it in the book, where he could just see from a few uses of early ChatGPT, this is going to be different. There's something going on here. But he uses the phrase jagged frontier. Sometimes it works spectacularly well, and then it can also spectacularly fail. It's the first technology that is, if you will, stochastic. In the past, we kind of knew more or less, with the exception of, say, algorithms where there were black boxes that, maybe Facebook, Meta, whoever, they knew how their algorithm worked, but the rest of us were sort of scratching our heads like, why did it recommend that movie to me on Netflix? That seems weird. But now we have technology in the hands of ordinary people who are realizing you ask a question and it gives you back an answer. You say, do it again, and it gives you a similar answer, but not the same one. It's this jagged frontier because these engines are essentially probabilistic. They're highly sensitive to context. So if you ask it like about Donna Jones' Agility Insights podcast, and if I added one word to that prompt, that query, it will really tilt its response, right? Or change one word. It's very sensitive to inputs, very sensitive to nuance. And so it's this crazy, powerful technology that we don't know how it answers the questions it answers. We really don't. And then people that built this, it's not like, Meta, who knows how their algorithm was built and more or less can explain it. This is not explainable. And to just hit one trend right off the bat that will be important as we start looking, as governments start stepping up, and there is not just the Europeans, but like I can say, the state of New Jersey, the state of Washington State, and the United States have already started developing AI task forces. And one of the things you hear over and over is explainability. We need some transparency here. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, the box itself is very dark. Even the people who built it cannot really explain what's going on. So how weird. Here we are. And I take this, I come across this YouTube, and it was, of course, recommended on YouTube. Hey, wouldn't you like to hear Led Zeppelin in 1940? And it was uncanny. We're in this uncanny world, the jagged frontier. And if you read the comments on this YouTube, people really enjoyed it. I think it had, I don't know, yesterday, a few 100,000 people had listened to this. And it's like Ella Fitzgerald's voice, but it's not Ella, right? It's AI Ella. It's singing in tune. It's in fact perfect tune. It's using all the words. Okay, when the levee breaks, da 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 da. It's like a jazz standard now,
Yeah.
Da, 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 and it's weird, and it's also kind of delightful, and it's also kind of icky. Like how does Robert Plant feel about this, or the founders of the band? On one level, they might be kind of tickled or honored, like great, what a creative use of our stuff. But then again, it's their material. This is on the borderline of a copyright violation. It's using their lyrics, and I understand why artists are worried. I understand why we've had the writers' strikes. I'm very concerned. I work with a deck of cards. This is one of the things. And what's Curtis up to? I play with cards. You know me. I love cards, card games for kind of
the best.
Next gen facilitation, innovation, teaching. And a great card deck I discovered for this space of Gen AI is, guess what? The Gen AI card deck.
I'm shocked.
I got a deck of cards. And it's fun. It was created by a fella. I give him a shout out, Alexandre Eichenstetter. He's based in Paris, France. And I helped give some feedback, one of the early co-creators with them in the beta testing phase. And now the cards are live, and I've used them in real workshops with clients. And it's a way to kind of baseline a little bit of the information, help people understand what is a large language model. So there's some foundational understanding. But when it gets really interesting, you start laying down the cards and building out future use cases of how might we do our own version of Led Zeppelin in 1940s, like in our business context.
Mhm.
And then you gotta play the danger cards. If you don't use these risk cards, you're not fully considering the potential, because if we don't consider the downsides as we're designing these things, as we're beginning to go to market with these tools, it's dangerous. We're moving into a very dangerous, chaotic place. We always talked about VUCA,
Yep.
VUCA, it's been a very strong, good, reliable acronym for us Agilists and systems complexity people. I think we need a new acronym. And guess what, Donna?
You have it.
We found one. I can tell you there's a new one.
All right.
All right. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay. BANI, BANI or BANI, however you want to pronounce it. I didn't create it. I just came across it a few weeks ago. I would call it it'll be my word of 2025. I'm going to adopt it.
Okay. And there's going to be a theme song to go with it, I'm sure.
We'll definitely need a theme song to go with it.
Yeah.
So this was created by a futurist. I just didn't know his work, but he lives in San Francisco area. His name is Jame Casio. Wonderful site to look at. Look at his site if you have a moment. And he coined it, I think, and it just is a good update. It's a refresh of VUCA. Here's what it stands for. B is for brittle. I'll tell you all four words first. So brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and and incomprehensible.
Yeah.
Now VUCA was strong for folks who haven't heard VUCA before. That was volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous.
Right.
I'm not throwing away VUCA. It's still very much there. But what I feel about his four words, they speak to what it feels like to live in a VUCA world.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's feeling brittle. It's feeling anxious, extremely nonlinear, and it's feeling incomprehensible. I think it gives a kind of interiority, a kind of personal depth to the VUCA, whereas VUCA felt almost scientific. We can study this phenomenon.
Yeah, that's right.
But what about me? I'm living in it. I'm in the space,
Yeah.
So what do you think about BANI? How does that land on you?
It makes sense. And I mean, I started writing about VUCA in 2008. So the terms have been around for a long time. And people would say, well, I've got this complexity thing. I've got this. Well, the decisions don't reflect that, and nor does the thinking. And so it was sort of like, we've got this checklist of characteristics in the context that we're just going to tick off and say, we've got that. We don't have it. If we did, the decisions would be far more sensitive to nuance, far more, they'd be different, very different. And they'd embrace nonlinearity as a quality of how we get things done, instead of just sticking to this very rigid, linear stuff we've been doing for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So I love it because it brings it home emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And it brings it, and I think there's a disconnect to be, or an opportunity to connect the emotional experience with the contextual experience.
Yeah.
You put those two together, and all of a sudden you have sense. It makes sense.
Thank you. Exactly. And when I work with the organization, say with the Gen AI card deck, it's the way I want to keep it. One of the principles. There's a great card. Let me see if I can. Oh, here it is. I can show you a few cards. All right. So I love this card. Is this coming through?
Backwards, but yes.
Okay. I'll read. I'll translate. It's called the sandwich. It's a principle. Always start with human. Always end with human. Meaning, these tools, again, make it so easy. Click a button. Oh, look, how cool. We've got Led Zeppelin is Ella Fitzgerald kind of thing, right? Or whatever your use of it is. It's too easy. It's just too easy. We need to keep friction. We need to keep humans in the loop, and they need to be like a sandwich at the front and at the back. Yeah, so the way when I'm working with folks and we're using Gen AI cards, I say, let's imagine first. Let's have a human conversation as a group. Let's talk about what we think what might happen. Then we use the AI, And then we compare, we cross notes and go, like for example, when I've used this really well, we're talking about we kind of have a little sandbox future world we're thinking about. Like I like to talk about the future of the meeting, the future of professional meetings, trade shows, conferences. It's a nice little place that when I'm teaching and working with the Gen AI cards, people can relate to because we've all been to professional conferences. We know this experience. We know when it's great. We know when it's not great. So I use that play space for these generative AI use cases. What if we could bring this superpower to the professional meeting? How could we transform it, innovate it, improve it? But we do it in this with the sandwich principle. So I say, hey, what do you guys think? I want you to talk as a group. Just talk. I want cell phones down, laptops down, no using technology. Talk as a group. What are the pain points of professional meetings today? Generate 5 questions as a group about like what ifs, how might we? If it doesn't start there, it's too easy to go into just letting the AI start ideating, right? And generating tons of stickies for you. It's out of control. It will generate way too much. So you've got to ask those framing questions first, get that conversation in the room. Now we're going to go, and then I'll say, okay, open laptops again. Now we're going to have some fun. Let's put your hypotheses to the test. Let's give it to, and I've got some pre-baked. I don't know if have you played with custom GPTs much? Do you know what a custom GPT is?
No, but I may have played with them, just not knowing what I was doing, which would be typical.
So, yeah, one of the big providers, ChatGPT by OpenAI, they early last year, they opened the ability for people, once you have a great prompt, like a prompt is how you get it to do something. You ask it a question in a very specific way or make some statements very specific, and then it responds to that. So once you've got a really interesting prompt that will be fun to play with, you can kind of store it, kind of like you might store a macro in an Excel document. And so you can reuse it later, call it like a function, right? So, I mean, I've got some that I use. Some that are just silly and fun, like one I've stored called the hyperbolizer. Okay, so the prompt was it was just to create these exaggerated versions of something that I'm talking about. I actually did this as a sort of mental hack myself because I don't know about you, I'm one of these people, I undervalue what I do. I don't like to brag. I don't like to showcase or spotlight myself. And when you got to do self-marketing, you're a solopreneur like you or me, we need to sometimes puff it up.
Yeah,
we got to puff it up a little bit. We got to sing our song. So I created Hyperbolizer, and it gives me 3 versions of what I've asked it about. One, the kind of like just slightly puffed version. The next one is a little stronger, a little more, wow, impactful. If Curtis could deliver that, it would have these impacts. And then the really strong version, it's galactic, it's universal. I mean, it's warping space-time. It's amazing.
I love it.
So that's a simple custom GPT. And so then when I'm working with ChatGPT, I can call the hyperbolizer in if I want to with the @ symbol. I can say let's see what hyperbolizer would say. So what this allows us to do is have a running kind of conversation. And I think it's fun to do this in a group. So that's what I'm doing with the group. We say, all right, now we're got some weird ideas here about the future of the professional meeting, of the trade show. Let's bring in this next little custom GPT. Let's bring in one that a friend, and what's nice too is you can share these with your friends. So anyone that has a ChatGPT account, I'm happy to share. I've got about 10 or 15 that are my go-tos, and they're not all the ones I created. They're created by people like Alex in Paris or my buddy Hamid in France also. So, pull these in, use them as thought partners. I think that's the best way to use these tools right now. So let's go back to BANI. I mean, when we're in the BANI space, we're working with clients or other colleagues, and we're talking about these complex issues, and we're working with wicked problems. Gen AI can really be an adjunct here. It can really be a friend. For giggles, I just asked right ahead of our call. I thought, well, let's just see how current the latest version of ChatGPT is on BANI. So I asked the question, what do you know about BANI? Because all these tools have a kind of knowledge cutoff date. They've been trained up to a point, right? Because that's how they're trained. But I think the knowledge cutoff date for ChatGPT is sometime early last year. So James Cassio or Jimmy Cassio, he came up with BANI a couple years ago. So yeah, sure enough, it knew it. It said, "Oh, I know BANI," And then I I used the @ symbol and I pulled in one of my little special custom GPTs called Context Explorer. I think you would like this one, Donna.
We played with one of them. It wasn't that one though, perhaps, but
No, this is
yeah,
the
that
one
one does sound good to me. Because
Context Explorer is good.
big.
If you want to widen the space, you want to diverge and see some adjacencies, there's a super prompt built into Context Explorer that is really fun. It's delightful. But you need to be the human entry point to that. You need to have a strong hypothesis or question. So I just started with BANI. I don't know. I need to decide what sounds better to you, BANI or BANI?
BANI, I'm afraid.
Let's go with BANI. Okay.
Well, just not to be confused with somebody, you know.
That's true. So yeah, I threw it BANI, and then it started diverging, and I kind of like used it just to get our conversation going today, just to get my mind oriented. You could use this ahead of a meeting. You don't even have to share it with your colleagues, but as a thought partner, as a little bit of a creative adjunct, I think these are wonderful use cases for the generative AI. Absolutely. You know.
So now you raised something. The other day I was in a coffee shop talking to some 20-somethings who were in university, and I happened to mention AI. We were just chatting, and they said, yeah, that's there to replace us.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, we're a bit of an interesting question mark then. And that is, who do we become through the introduction of generative AI and the use of generative AI? Do we just delegate our thought process to that technology? Do we actually use it as an adjunct? Retain some sensibility around who we are?
Yes, that's my answer.
That's mine too, obviously. You know, but it's got to be an intentional choice. It can't be an accidental choice. It's got to be something that people decide, you know, I'm smart, I bring something into the world, I'm creative, whatever labels, however you see yourself or have been profiled, you know, using whatever self-awareness tools there are available today.
Yeah.
And you get some sense around, this is what I bring to the world. And then you use AI or generative AI, or, you know, as the adjunct,
I
versus.
agree.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the more I listened to that, to go back to the Led Zeppelin one again, it got cheesier and cheaper for me, because then I did a little research. I said, which tool did they use? They used a tool from China. It was called Mareka. And, you know, you basically take someone else's IP, you play a Led Zeppelin song to it, you take the lyrics out of that artist's work, you pop it in, and then you pick up an avatar, a genre like Ella Fitzgerald, 1940s, and then you push a button. Okay. It's very
Black soul.
Yeah. And it's just, you know, and it wore thin after a while. It was like, oh, cool. And then almost like, you know, I don't know how to feel about it now. And you know, how was, I would be curious to know what artists like Plant or others, some might be okay with it, but it's really on this weird border. And so yes, we will adjunct, we will augment, that's the term, augment ourselves. But this is the thing, it's going to impact us and we're going to change it. There is an interesting, this is the nonlinearity. If there's one shining, I mean, bright, shiny example of nonlinearity, it's this technology. There is this feedback loop going on. So we're interacting with it. It's generating outputs. These outputs are going back out into the world again. They're going into blogs. They're going into conversations that get recorded like ours. There's a transcript from this conversation. Guess what? They're going to pick that up and they're going to train the next version of whatever their large language model is. Could be Gemini, Llama, ChatGPT, whatever. They're going to use our conversation that you and I are having right now to train the next model.
Yeah.
But this is a weird feedback loop. I mean, there's one thing that's called model collapse. Some people have speculated that the models will literally fall down on themselves, because it's like, you know, remember if you made a copy back in the old days, we used to make copies on Xerox machines, and then you took the output and you copied that, and you took the output of that and you copied that. You remember how weird and like degraded it would get?
Very.
We're moving into a time where this is a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. And there is like serious scholarly work into what happens if the models collapse. Okay, so
no, that's a very interesting question.
That's hyper nonlinearity, right?
Yeah, and going back to what you were saying earlier too, just the unexplainability. There's a random element to it.
Incomprehensibility.
Yeah,
hyper stochastic. Right.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's why the use cases that I'm emphasizing are creative adjuncts, divergence, show me adjacencies. Those sort of things are where it will shine. Where I frankly say, like, one of the danger cards is probably the one that's talked about the most. Let's see if here it is. This one, right?
Hallucination.
Right? Did you read it backwards?
I did. I did.
Yeah, hallucination. I'll just read the card. AI sometimes generates incorrect information. Remediate by never trusting AI blindly and using verification tools. Well, yes, like right now, I'm working on a story for Innovation Leader magazine, one of the places I'm writing my articles for. And I'm looking at the top 10 US firms by revenue, and I'm looking at everything in their public filings and documents like SEC filings, 10Ks, their press releases, their corporate governance. I got a lot of data, right? Is Curtis going to have time to read all of that? No, I can't. So I'm going to use a tool here to help me. So I'm feeding it into, and I use multiple tools. I'm using Gemini under Notebook LM. That's a Google product. I'm using OpenAI ChatGPT. I'm also using Perplexity, which is another one that reaches out and searches web. So I've got 3 tools. That's already a remediation, because you need to put these tools against each other. Don't trust just one of them, because they're going to give different results. And then I sometimes take the output of a Perplexity and I'll then give it to ChatGPT. Again, using them against each other. Don't trust just one tool. So that's, but what I'm saying is hallucination is sometimes exactly what we need.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know the book by Pollan, which was called, might even be up here on my shelf. It was the one about the resurgence of interest in psychedelic drugs. Pollan, is it Pollan? Pollock? He wrote that book about mushrooms and the resurgence of scientific study of the modern uses of, because it got shut down in the U.S. at least. I don't know about Canada, but in the U.S. that was like verboten. You could not study any of these substances, peyote or whatever, right? Psilocybin. Now it's back, and there's a kind of burgeoning movement. You probably heard about microdosing and things like that.
Yes.
So how are we going to cope with an anxious world? To go back to BANI, well, we will need mindfulness practices, and some of the stories in that book, and just people I've talked to have had these experiences, say it was life transforming. If you read the studies coming out of like Johns Hopkins University, the follow-on studies of people who had these controlled experiences of hallucination,
right,
were extremely positive. They, like, someone that was just generally not depressed. These aren't people that were suffering severe depression. Just someone that's like you and I, lived a while, and life and things are weighing on us, and we're just not feeling like life is beautiful anymore. And they have this experience, and they report months and years later, they still can reattach. They can still find that beauty in life again. There's something magical still in the world. There's something beautiful here. If that is what hallucination can do for us, then I'm all for it. Okay, in small doses. And I think this is where hallucination in AIs is cool. What they do for us is they get us to see things, just turn it around a little bit, twist the perspective, because you and I know the value of reframing in a complex environment. We know the value of saying, we need another perspective here. So like one of my little stored custom GPTs is called Jedi on the Fly.
I love it.
Jedi on the Fly. And this was made again by Hamid, my buddy Hamid in a shot. It's brilliant. Can I just read to you the Jedi I made for BANI?
Definitely.
Okay. So, because I just love the way Hamid did this. So this is his work. He stored these prompts. And then, so when you talk to this Jedi, you just ask it a question like, I said, hey, Jedi, a Jedi on the Fly, I need a Jedi who is expert in BANI. Okay, and I had just said prior in the chat what BANI was, and we were having a little back and forth. So it knows BANI. It's in context. That's called our context window. So, boom, I get this. Check this out. I adopt the role of Bani Wan Adaptobi.
Okay, that's multisyllabic.
Yeah, well, he's using the he's playing with the Jedis, the Star Wars, right? Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yep.
So I adopt the role of Bani Wan Adaptobi, the Jedi of chaos and resilience. I am an adaptive strategist in the uncharted dimensions of the BANI universe, which is brittle, anxious, nonlinear, incomprehensible. My expertise spans the delicate art of navigating systemic fragility, harnessing emotional resilience, decoding nonlinearity, and simplifying complexity into actionable insights. Hey, wouldn't you hire that kid? I mean, like, I want that as an adjunct. Wouldn't you want to have that?
Yes, that sounds brilliant.
So you can bring that into your
Mm.
conversation with you got that Jedi on the fly, and it will challenge your thinking in a good way. That's a good hallucination. That's where
Mhm.
hallucination is great. I
Yeah.
don't have a problem with hallucination. But for my factual analysis, where I'm doing that study of the 10 US corps, I have to do double, triple fact checking because it will make mistakes on that kind of stuff, and it will continue to do that. It's built into the technology. It is, it's a what I say. I mean, the old classic. It's not a bug. It's a feature, and I want to use it that way. So that's where I'm going with these tools.
I love it. Now, what does all this mean for business? Because we had sort of an innovation backlash post-COVID. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
ran into their closets and hid for, I don't know, maybe even now they're still hiding. I don't know. Are they still hiding, or are they coming out and thinking we've got this creative cohort of young people who are in this multi-generational workforce, and
Mm-hmm.
we want to explore with them what's possible for how we function in this world of change? Because the whole idea of hiding in your cave is only going to last so long, and then you're just going to never come out.
Yeah.
So what do you see there? What do you see with that interaction?
Yeah. I see there's still a bit of a pullback. I mean, just strictly in terms of like innovation teams. These are teams that were chartered to be charting the future of their companies. They were funded as innovation work groups, and they would have like a VP of innovation at the head of them, and they got to play with all the fun tools, all the hot technologies. There's been a pullback still on that. Like companies like Walmart that used to have those. There was a thing, it was called Store 88, was a dedicated store where all this funky experimentation was happening. They closed that. There's been a pullback, but what I talk about with like Scott Kersner, the CEO of Innovation Leader, and I think he agrees, is like innovation is an enduring need, not just in business, but in schools, in education, in government. Now, I don't think the Elon Musk version of let's go in and cut government and whatever you're calling Doge, DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, that's not innovation. That's kind of slashing and burning. It might net some innovation in the end. There could be something innovated. The most creative conversations I want to hear is, are we willing to let some things go? Do you ever heard of the book Sacred Cows Make Gourmet Burgers?
I have heard it. Yeah. Well, I also worked with Irvin Laszlo on an article called about sacred cows as well. It was published on the HuffPost.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If we're not willing to let go of some of our dearest cherished beliefs and structures and institutions, then we will not have innovation. So there, in some sense, I'm okay with this slash and burning if it's done in the most creative and human-centered and thoughtful of ways, where we're running multiple experiments. So where I'm still doubling down, and I see other companies are, is open innovation, decentralized innovation, getting more voices in the room. A colleague of mine, Diana Joseph, runs a beautiful conversation called Click. You got to spell that CLICK exclamation point. She calls it the Click Accelerator Forum, and she's just coming out with her book on open innovation. This is still needed. This is tapping to think about our network analysis friends, our own amigos. They were spot on. They're still spot on. The value of the network and tapping broader networks, wider groups of stakeholders, including them. So in a business context, that's your ecosystem. What maybe you should bring your suppliers, your partners, your customers into this conversation about the future. Why do you want to keep it in these four walls, right? We need to broaden the conversation. So within a business context, you can widen that out and innovate, co-create with your suppliers, your partners, your customers, and so forth. And maybe the ones that might be your future customers you haven't even thought of yet. Well, let's bring some young people in the room too. Some creative college students. And by the way, don't forget your adjuncts, like your Jedi on the fly. Let's bring a few of those in also.
Yeah.
We can hold these conversations together. So I think there's still strong need for decentralized innovation, open innovation. I see that trend still coming up. Diana's book, I mean, this is published by a solid, I don't know if it's Routledge or one of the major publishers has picked up her book.
Good.
I mean, that says that, yes, there's a there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, if there's any forces that are pushing back on innovation, what would they be?
Well, in the BANI context, where you have high anxiety, it's going to be a friction point with willing to slay the sacred cow, okay?
Mm, yeah.
Or even poking the sacred cow.
Yeah.
It's why our conversations are so polarized, right? I spoke to my local government board. They have a meeting. They're getting ready to do another round of legislating in Florida. They go to Tallahassee, Florida. And so once a year before they go to Tallahassee, which I appreciate, they host a public meeting where people can provide citizen input. So I spoke last week, and you want to guess what topic Curtis Michelson brought to the Orange County, Florida delegation meeting?
I'd love to learn.
Well, it definitely had Gen AI in it, right?
Yeah.
And I gave the simple example of my son's school. And I said, my kid was having a near failing grade in physics. This is tough. I mean, I remember this course. I didn't do well in it the first time around in calculus. Interesting, he's got an A in calculus, but physics, he wasn't doing so well. And he was very behind on these homework assignments. And I said, for my own little experiment, I decided to bring in ChatGPT. And this tool can take a picture. It has, you can use your phone camera. You take a picture. So I just literally took a picture of his homework assignment. The one that had, this was the classic, the box that's sliding down the incline. And you have to sort of figure out the forces acting on it when it's this angle or that, and speed of that. Okay, so you take a picture and it has the illustration and the description of the word problem. ChatGPT, 10 seconds later, it's like Institutor. Talk about a Jedi on the fly. It not only gave the answer, but it gave a reasoning process, very step by step in its thinking. My son saw that and his jaw dropped. He said, "Dad, I had no idea it could do this." Now, the teacher worries, oh my gosh. One, they think I might be out of a job. Like,
Yeah.
what do they need me for anymore, right?
Yeah.
I'll get to that in a second. But the student thinks, the worry is the student's going to just cheat. They're just going to use this as a short run around their homework. He didn't do that. What was interesting about my experiment was he read the results and he was really trying to figure out its reasoning process. He followed through the logic, and then we did a few more like that, and it kind of unblocked him. He sort of got incline problems after that, like you decompose vectors. And this is where your trigonometry comes back again. So the cosine of the angle is really the force acting on, that kind of thing. So I saw genuine understanding and a kind of relit up interest in physics. And I shared this story with the Orange County, Florida delegation meeting. Okay. And then I also shared the counterpoint story. I said, hey, I asked his English teacher at the start of the school year, what do you think about ChatGPT? She looked horrified. She said, I dare not mention it. I can't bring this up. So here's these polarities. You've got kids, well, frankly, who already are experimenting with these tools. They are.
Yeah.
The genie's out of the bottle. And you have teachers and school systems and administration systems who are like, they're so anxious. They're so wrapped up in the brutal, anxious moment that they dare not take a chance. That's if we need to go back to your question. So what fights innovation? What fights experimentation is this fear that the AI is simply going to be a dumbing down of us all. Kids won't learn anything, and we're going to have to fire all the creatives, the artists, the writers, the musicians, the teachers. That's the dark dystopian, and I just think that's overkill. It's so wrong.
Yeah.
And so the sentiment I shared with them was, look, we need to start experimenting with this. My wife, on the contrast, give you a contrasting story. She teaches in the private school system, not the public one. And she works at a preparatory school, and they're not so scared of it. They're like, you know what? Let's start playing with this. Let's try it. She's allowed to use Gen AI tools. She can let it help her write a lesson plan. And so that's freeing her up to work more with kids. Hey, if that's the reallocation of our resources, that, knowledge workers broadly will reallocate our time to do more of what you and I are doing right now, like sense-making conversations and really deep conversations, and less of drudge work, hey, I'm all for that future. I'm down. I'm down. What was that song? Who did? I'm down. Yeah, I'm down with that one, baby. That's so I'm all about augmentation, conversation, disruptive innovation. I'm still good with it. I just think that we need to experiment a lot more, be willing to lean into this technology. It is scary. There's some things that are very dark sides. My parents are seniors and they're going to be exposed to more deep fake scams than ever. Okay, it was already bad, the kind of calls they would get that were scamming my parents.
Yeah.
Now there's a call they're gonna answer the phone and it's gonna sound exactly like me. They're gonna think it's me. Okay. And they're gonna, the worst case scenario, open the bank account for this person that sounds like Curtis. These kind of things are the dark side. That is absolutely in play, right? So we got to balance these forces, and we can't be afraid to hold these conversations.
Do I have time for one more question?
Yep.
Before we close off, ethics.
Yeah.
Ethics. There's been maybe I've got a John. I'm not sure what's going on here, but generally I'm finding there's some ethical stuff that's not exactly honorable or of integrity or of sound character or of any fill in the blank. Where do you think, I mean, we have an opportunity, I think, as leaders in the leadership zone or the whole leadership domain to starting with the self, with being part of a solution there. What do you think AI does to challenge our leadership capabilities, character development?
How can it be sort of our friend in sort of this ethical dimension?
Precisely. Yep.
Yeah. Well, there's a Jedi for that. I mean, that's the fun thing about Jedi on the Fly. You can define that tool I was telling you. That's why I enjoy it so much. You can define an ethical character. I also one of the Jedis I created is, we call her Debbie Downer. Do you remember there was a Saturday Night Live series?
I do.
This is going a little bit in the Wayback Machine, but she was the party pooper. Like,
that's right.
You remember her?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so we created Debbie Downer as a Jedi, as a Chat GPT kind of little character, and she plays the role so well, better. I wouldn't say better than the actor that did Saturday Night Live, but we really have her leaning into the role. Okay, so imagine you bring Debbie Downer into some of these strategic conversations you're having, but and other versions of her that you can say, I really want an ethical philosopher in the room, because maybe they're not available to hire right now. Well, let's bring that at least into the conversation. Let's bring these countervailing voices and perspectives into the room. It's very interesting. Even if you just said, treat me like if I was remember the Socratic dialogues? Plato wrote all these Socratic dialogues. And how did Socrates act? He asked provocative questions. It was called the Socratic method.
Yeah.
Well, you can have the GPT act like that too. It can challenge our thinking. You need to hold it to standards. I'm just looking again at the risk cards. Biases. Yes. Can we ask that question? Are we reinforcing the worst biases by onboarding this system that saves our HR team oodles of hours because they're no longer reading resumes? They're just, it's this hyper smart job system or talent acquisition system. Have we brought the biasy conversation in the room? Have we brought in the conversation around well, here's one. I mean, let's be mindful of dependence. Are we going to become overly dependent on these tools? I've got 12 of these risk cards, but we really, actually, I think Alex, the creator of the card deck, is reframing them the ethics cards.
Yeah.
I think we need to play these cards in our conversations. They should get us to slow down and ask these questions that need to be at every level of the organization, but especially at the strategic level, at the highest levels.
Yeah. And I love that slow down, because the temptation, I mean, AI is, as Rod Collins called, is accelerated intelligence. So the temptation is to just go with the acceleration and not think, not be intentional, not be mindful about what we're doing or the decisions we're making. So the whole idea of slowing down, being more reflective, asking questions, doing that in the first place, bringing in that critical thinking, the risk questions is, I think, probably one of the highest leverage actions anybody can take right now. But does that apply to their personal or professional lives?
I agree. I just got off the phone with a fellow that just came out with his latest book. His name is Matt LeMay, and it's in the product management more or less space, but it's broadly applicable to the type of teams we're talking about. And I said, so how many frameworks? He said 0 frameworks in this book. I said, all right, you got one checkbox right there. I'm already leaning in,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
I said, and he opened the book. He had a galley version from the publisher, so it's already looking good. It's looking like a book. And he opens. He said, "I'm asking questions." I said, "Oh, great! Now you really are talking to me."
Yeah.
He's asking. He's. These are questions. Like one of the questions was, would you? This is what a product team should be asking themselves. One of the things is, would you fund your own team if you were the CEO for a day? Would you fund this unit?
Great
Boy,
question.
what a thought stopper question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Good question.
I think strategic question. So if the Gen AI future speeds some things up, to your point, then it definitely, the countervailing force should be slowing some things down. And that's our sense-making conversations, our strategic conversations. Let's build a future that's both fast and slow, that does that balanced dance. So I'm totally with you on that.
Yeah, and related to that is the organizational intuition, which exists. There is this sensibility around what's going to happen next. It's sort of built into the sensory environment. So as soon as you slow down, you can hear those voices.
Absolutely. And if you go back to decentralized innovation, open innovation that my friend Diana's talking about, you get that out of the box. When you open your conversation to your stakeholders, your ecosystem, you bring so what? It's a vendor you've had that they do one small thing every year, but they might have a perspective and another company that's a partner and bring in some customers. You widen that conversation. Guess what? Your organizational intuition quotient goes way up.
Way up.
Way up.
Absolutely. Right. Curtis, what a blast. Thanks so much for being a part of this year's launch.
It was a BANI blast.
It was a BANI blast. So thanks for coming and joining. And I will try to gather all those resources from you. Last year you did one page.
Send them over. Yeah, you have some show notes we can attach to this?
Please do. Yeah, definitely. Right. It would be great. And then people have got the references and we can
People can try the Jedi on the fly.
I think I want to see the context in that Context Explorer. I want to play with that.
Oh, that's a good, you'll love Context Explorer. Yes.
That would be fun. Curtis, thanks so much. Where do people go for more of you?
Oh, find me on LinkedIn, Curtis Michelson. You'll find me there. And then I lead a series of conversations in a community called the AI Tinkerers Club. Worth checking out. If you Google I think that's the operative phrase. We're all tinkering. Nobody knows all this stuff. We need to test and
Let's
tinker.
Be honest here.
Yep, AI Tinkerers Club, and I hang out there and I lead something called the Curtis Jamboree. That's my French version, Curtis. And I host a series of conversations where we play, tinker, challenge our thinking. So you can find me in those places.
I've dropped the resources that Curtis and I talked about in this episode in the show notes. I encourage you to try out some of them. Curtis always provides huge value to my listeners. I know that going forward, we're going to need to be thinking differently. It's where consciousness comes from and how it shifts. It's not through the very narrow lens that fear and anxiety channel us into. It's from asking big questions to really opening up conversations and looking at things through a much wider lens. I hope you've enjoyed this program and this start to 2025. I'll be doing bi-weekly episodes with inspirational insights, quite simply because the live streaming allows me to add more to the load, which changed over in 2022. We're in a time when things are no longer easy. They will be challenging, and that will call for a commitment to creating a better world through the experiences we have by redirecting a lot of dark and difficult energies into more constructive conversations and creative conversations, using our intelligence to be creative as opposed to following down the straight lines that we've been following without questioning. This is an important time to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, what contribution do I really want to make? And to reflect on what talent you bring to the equation, because everybody brings something, even if it's just a different point of view. It's something that helps us think better together, collectively, and be better for the planet, for business, for society, for the environment across the board. If you like this program, please share it. Please comment, provide a review. My name is Donna Jones. You can find me on LinkedIn. and I'll drop other contact information in the show notes. If you are looking for someone who can bring a different point of view into your thinking as an organization, or are looking for some insights, some different ways of seeing things, please reach out and set up a time to talk to me, and we can explore how thinking differently can really open up what appears to be a very stuck situation. Welcome to 2025. Thanks for joining me.